Testing.
Takashi, can you hear me?
Yes, Rakesh, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay. Do you need to test video or?
Yeah, if you can just turn on. Yes, I can see you. That's great.
I don't know where I'm supposed to look.
Never mind.
Okay. So we're good to
Takashi,
go,
can
no?
you hear me?
No, you're a bit muted. Hello? Sorry, Rakesh, I lost you. Rakesh, can you hear me? He what? Oh, he left the meeting. Okay. Hey.
Good day, everybody. The meeting is going to start in just a few minutes.
Okay, good afternoon or good morning, good evening, wherever you are online. This is the side event on priorities for sub-regional cooperation for climate action and SDGs in South and Southwest Asia. Thank you all for coming here physically in Bangkok and also online. My name is Mikiko Tanaka. I'm the head of the sub-regional office for South and Southwest Asia. And I am in great company here in Bangkok. We have 4 panelists, very expert and distinguished panelists. And I will introduce them one by one. But we also had a change because we were expecting actually, welcome. We were expecting the Honorable Ms. Romina Khurshid Alam from Pakistan to join, but there was a last minute impediment and unfortunately she was not able to. But she was actually very excited and passionate about the theme and wanted to really join. So I'm sorry that we couldn't do it this time. Hopefully we have a future opportunity to do this. So this side event, we from the sub-regional office for South and Southwest Asia, we organized this in collaboration with a network of think tanks in South and Southwest Asia called SANS. And this is to discuss how does the think tanks, SANS being in it, but there are many more research academic institutions in this sub-region, how they can work together. And in that, of course, as SCAP, we would like to also collaborate to support the actions that are really, really urgent, important in climate for this sub-region. Also noting that sub-regional cooperation is very important, but not always evident or easy. What might be some actions, low-hanging fruit actions that are possible in this sub-region, really to address the urgency and the intensity of the effects of climate change that countries and people of the sub-region are facing, and what can these think tanks can do to foster that regional cooperation. So we have from the panelists some interventions, presentations, looking at different aspects of climate action. And then after that, I'd like to open the floor for both questions, but also suggestions, what can we do together? And obviously we know that for the Sustainable Development Goals, really, we need everybody to pitch in. It's an ambitious goal, but it's a really important one that affects everyone. And all participants too, please, any ideas from the policymakers to NGOs or activists or politicians, wherever you may be, private sector, what is possible and how we can work together. So with that, I'd like to kickstart, really inviting the panelists to make their interventions. I start from Professor Nagesh Kumar, who is very well known in SCAP and of course is my predecessor as well of the sub-regional office. He's now the director for the Institute for Studies in Industrial Development based in New Delhi. And so Dr. Kumar, your intervention is going to be on clean energy, really a priority. And I think you have a presentation as well. I'll let you use that and you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mikiko. It's a privilege to be part of this very distinguished panel of old friends. And I'm very happy to be on the other side of the table. I mean, for many years, I was on the side of ASCAP Secretariat, and now on the other side. It's interesting to switch roles. And the other thing is that I'm very happy that you thought of organizing a side event at the Commission session on this climate action, which is for South Asia, I think, the very critical challenge, because as we all know, and I'm sure my friend Abid will talk about it more, that despite the low per capita emissions, South Asian countries are among the most vulnerable from the climate change. And you see the list on the top, most of the South Asian countries are in that. And the clean energy transition needs to be underpinned and in the climate action and accelerated in South Asia, because nearly 70% of emissions are linked to energy generation, not only in South Asia, but worldwide. And because of that region, nationally determined contributions and net zero targets of South Asian governments have all hinged on clean energy transition. So every single country in South Asia has NDCs and the net zero goals, they are all hinged on clean energy transition. But there is also an economic case for clean energy transition for South Asian countries, which are heavily dependent upon imports of hydrocarbons. And we know that any oil price movements or shocks affect their economies very badly. And currently, we have been passing through that kind of a situation. Then pollution resulting from hydrocarbon burning, in engines, is a major challenge in South Asia. Many of our cities in South Asia are among the most polluted ones. So controlling, bringing down this, hydrocarbon use in energy production will also have payoffs in pollution reduction. And then, very interestingly, South Asia is now trying to have this structural transformation in favor of manufacturing, and this clean energy transition could also help foster the green structural transformation and help in creating green jobs for the youthful population. Key opportunities, several. Let me not spend any time on reading them out, but go straight to the 4-5 I have picked up. So in hydroelectric sector, which is one of the key areas of climate transition or clean energy transition, South Asia has been a pioneer. I think there is some echo for some. Yes, in regional cooperation for hydroelectric energy, because several decades ago, Bhutan and India started to cooperate in hydroelectric energy development, way before these climate concerns started to dominate the development debates. But now it is being extended to cover more countries. For instance, Bangladesh is, interested in importing hydroelectric power from Nepal through India. So trilateral and quadrilateral, processes are developing. Yesterday, there was a very interesting discussion on this. But only 18% of 350 gigawatts potential of South Asia has been exploited so far. That says that there is a lot of work to be done to fully harness this potential. The tapping of solar and wind resources. This is the kind of major new area of investment and tapping the potential. At least, India has gone in this direction in a very big manner. And just to give you an indicator, in last 7 years, the renewable energy capacity of India has been nearly quadrupled from 39.5 gigawatts to 151. And in 7 years from now, by 2030, it has to be tripled again. So there are many plans and national solar mission. But most interesting part is that solar power is now more competitive than coal-based generation. So this is something of a major transformation. And there has been this establishment of International Solar Alliance to promote solar energy worldwide, jointly with France. But major expansion of solar energy and wind energy in South Asia needs to be underpinned by local production capacity for PV cells, modules, batteries, and storage solutions. And for that, there has been a renewed interest worldwide for building production capacities, including through industrial policy, use of industrial policy. And I don't have time to elaborate on, but maybe in the discussion one can come back, including in the US. And so India is also having a PLI, production-linked incentive, to encourage production of these equipment. Then green hydrogen is also an area of immense development, immense potential, and there is a lot of work being done in not only in India but also in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, because green hydrogen has a potential, is a potential substitute of fossil fuels, with applications in several sectors: transport, fertilizers, chemicals, steel, besides electricity generation. And so many, initiatives are coming up. Practically every week you see a major corporate announcing plans for giga factories for green hydrogen. Again, the productive capacity for electrolyzers would be a major issue for major expansion of green hydrogen. So coming to the key challenges and issues, I think we need to agree to a moratorium on coal-based plants, and some of the South Asian countries, including Pakistan, have announced that. In 2020, Pakistan went ahead to announce a moratorium on coal-based power plants, and other countries are following in suit. The phase out of fuel subsidies, again, that is happening, gradually, and phasing in of carbon taxes. So this is another major important sort of issue to push the clean energy transition. Grid interconnections can be very important for sharing hydro and solar resources across the subregion. And yesterday there was a discussion about in the BBIN context, and more needs to be done. Incentivization of renewable energy sources and electric mobility. Different countries are evolving different policies. There is a lot of subsidies and incentives available for that. The finance is going to be a major constraint because new investments, for renewable energy have to be put up. And for that, role of international cooperation, this is an agenda very much on top of the G20 discussions taking place currently in India. Because of the G20 presidency. But there is an important role for private-public partnerships, green bonds, green banking guidelines. The central banks issuing instructions for lenders to incentivize the clean energy transition. And then technology and productive capacity, building up innovative capacity and activity in the South Asian region, climate-related exceptions for access to technology, clean technologies, and that need discussion in multilateral trade negotiations has to go forward, and reforms of multilateral trade governance to make that happen. The TRIPS agreement, I think, has a lot of provisions for transfer of technology which have not been elaborated, and this is the time to elaborate them and get the action going. So finally, this is my last slide, and just to conclude with some issues for sub-regional cooperation and the potential role for SANS and ASCAP, SSWA. So I think one issue for regional cooperation is coordinated carbon taxes, fuel subsidy phase out, and phase out of coal-based power plants. These actions need to be coordinated within the sub-region because of the prisoner's dilemma inherent in such actions. If one country takes these steps, then investments flow out of that, So there are issues for coordinated action. Then deepen and extend hydroelectric cooperation and grid connectivity. There are a lot of potential of that. A lot of action is happening, but more is needed. Acceleration is needed. Then cooperation to build innovative and productive capacity for clean energy transition, especially for the equipment and innovations, will have to underpin this transition. And South Asian countries have coordinated in the past, but now more so in the climate discussions in global forums like UNFCCC COPs, the WTO, Bretton Woods institutions, to seek commitments on finance, technology, and policy space, the flexibility to pursue industrial policy instruments, and for effective implementation for climate action. As we all know, many things have been said and promised and not delivered. So when can we get them delivered? And finally, sharing of development experiences, including policies adopted for promoting renewable energy, electric vehicles, energy efficiency, productive capacities, among others. And here, SANS has a clear-cut role to play. And I'm very happy that the office, sub-regional office in Delhi continues to push SANS and make it a very vibrant platform. And finally, I think the SCAP office and SANS could facilitate the clean energy transition of South Asian countries by helping the sub-region to formulate a sub-regional action plan for clean transition and facilitate sub-regional cooperation, and also implementing some of the SCAP wide strategies. For instance, I was reading the latest theme study for the Commission, which talks about ASCAP's regional cooperation mechanism for low carbon transport and Asia-Pacific initiative on electric mobility in South and electric mobility, which could be, implemented in South and Southwest Asia region by the sub-regional office, because this is the sub-region most populous of the sub-regions of ASCAP, which needs this much more than all other sub-regions. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nagesh. Very, very comprehensive. There's a lot of opportunities. And it's interesting to know, actually, I didn't know that this hydropower trade actually started from this region. And yet there's so much potential that still has yet to be, realized. So a lot of thought for, what to do next. But thank you very much for that. I'd like to shift now to, that was a little bit more on the mitigation of carbon emission, I presume. We're going to shift a bit on the impact of climate change, and also noting that this sub-region, both South Asia and Southwest Asia, are extremely vulnerable to these extreme weather events that are intensifying and also increasing in frequency. We'll look at what it means for these countries to build this resilience in this really unprecedented phase in all our world's experience. And I think no better position to do that is from Pakistan, because last year, of course, there were these really, really, tragic, devastating floods that took place. And I'm sure there's a lot of lessons also to learn that will be messages to other countries as well. Also, what can be done for sub-regional or regional cooperation to enhance the resilience of all the countries. So I'd like to invite Dr. Abid Suleri, the Executive Director of the Sustainable Development Policy Institute based in Islamabad. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, depending from where you are joining us today for this side event. Thank you, Nagesh, for setting the scene, and that would turn my job much easier. And I'll like to just build the case for cooperation for climate resilience in South and Southwest Asia. This is just a quick graphical representation of how the globe is warming day by day, week by week, and year by year. So the red and maroonish color, as you can see in the bar, is increase in temperature. The light blue or bluish color, that is from where we started. And this is from World Economic Forum, the 2021, where they presented this monthly global mean temperature. Now, one could have been perhaps contended about it, but only yesterday, World Meteorological Organization, WMO, they gave this warning, and they said that there would be 66% chances that the world would exceed the 1.5 degree Celsius threshold in at least one of the next 5 years. So only last year, their estimate was that there are 48% chances. Now they're saying it's 66% chances. So the coming years will be the hottest ever, of course, due to the ENSO, El Nino Southern Oscillation phenomenon, but also due to various other reasons. Now, while Nagesh was presenting the case for renewable energy, I think that becomes even more important to phase out fossil fuels and to shift towards the cleaner sources if we can, if we want to try limiting the impact of this hot weather in our areas. Now, that is from last year, 30th April 2022, and Pakistan was the hottest place on Earth, highest temperature ever recorded on Earth in April. So that was April, and then only a few months later, this place, Jatpabad, along with the other areas in Sindh, they were heavily flooded. And again, I want to repeat that this was just the beginning. If we look at this WMO warnings, if we look at IPCC technical reports, so these phenomena, they are going to actually worse, and not only in Pakistan, but also the adjoining regions and the neighboring countries. Some of the highlights of floods I won't go into detail, but this is where I want to spend my next couple minutes. This is from IPCC 2021 technical report. Number of people displaced every year over 2010 to 2020 by extreme weather events grouped by continent. So it's not something that would happen in future. It is what has already happened during last decade. And in Asia, Southeast and Southeast Asia, they have seen the highest number of people displaced per year. You can see the dark blue color is floods. Then we have storms, and the brownish color is a drought. So either we have a very high temperature and no rain at all, that leads to drought, but it's floods and storms that led to internal displacement during last decade. And again, if you just extrapolate the numbers for the next 10 years, unfortunately, this trend is going to increase. Now, very quickly, when we talk of impact on South Asia, we are talking of this redesigning our cities and energy systems, water resources, so that we can think of climate smart cities, climate smart agriculture, climate smart dwelling. When we talk of heat exposure and the risk of concurrent floods and drought incident, again, the countries, they need to have a disaster preparedness. And unfortunately, according to IPCC, in South Asia, Pakistan is among the most vulnerable to climate change. Then we know about the extreme heat and drought, and Indus and Ganga River basins, they would be facing deadly heat waves. So South Asia will be one of the regions hardest hit by heat stress, and climatically stressful workday increased to 250 per year. Nepal, 24% of its glacier area from 1980 to 2010, they have lost to these changing climate and increased temperature. And it would have a disproportionate effect on women in South Asia. They would have to bear the impacts of climate change more than the men. Frequent drought, heat waves, increased workload, this internal displacement. And it would also affect the long-term decline in hydropower productivity. So initially, the glacier would melt, and once the Himalayan glaciers they have melt beyond a certain threshold, the water that our rivers receive for hydropower that would start receding. 4 million people were displaced in disaster-induced events in Bangladesh and India in 2019. Now, what needs to be done? And I have adopted the pressure state response framework, and my last couple of minutes, I will focus on what needs to be done. So we know there is climate change and global warming, temperature rise, rainfall, drought, glacier lake outbursts, floods, health issues, food security, and energy. We need to think of climate-smart way of living, climate-smart livelihoods, climate-smart agriculture, climate-smart cities, climate-smart villages. And to do the needful, we need to learn from each other. So South-South cooperation becomes even more important in order to understand that how the countries with the very similar socioeconomic conditions and very similar climatic conditions, they can cope with these changing climate phenomena. And that includes adaptation and mitigation. In adaptation, I hope Mazhar would be highlighting it. One of the best examples that one can learn in region is from Bangladesh, who have practically become cyclone-proof, and there's a lot to learn there. Institutional arrangement and institutional collaboration, not only between federal governments and provincial governments, union government and state government, but also within those subnational governments. That is extremely important. Coordination with rest of the world. Then awareness raising, public-private partnership, bringing in private sector as part of solution rather than looking at them as the origin of problem. So we need to engage and involve them for solutions. Research, and most important, loss and damage fund, which was proposed by G77 plus China under the presidency of Pakistan in COP27. We need to keep the momentum for COP28 to push for it. We also need to push for climate justice. And if I can quote one very important point from COP27 declaration, where the members they stressed upon international financial institutes to be more climate responsive and to take care of climate vulnerable countries without wasting much time. So when we talk, say, be more climate sensitive, it means we are talking of climate justice from IMF, from World Bank, from ADB and other big lenders. And looking at Sri Lanka, which even after declaring default had to go through more than 1 year to get some relief. I think, again, one of the pressure that needs to be built is not only loss and damage fund, but also that we need World Bank and IMF and ADB to mend their ways. Now, in our region, this is the simplistic roadmap that I could think of how we can move ahead. And within this development conundrum, we need to take almost each actor and factor here along. And when I looked at the capacity of SANS, I realized that there is no other organization or network better placed than the members of South Asia Network on Sustainable Development Goals. So each one of us, we call ourselves shadow cabinet. So be it SDPI in Pakistan, be you talk of CPD in Bangladesh, or be it SOTI in Nepal. We know SOTI head is now preparing the budget for the next fiscal year in Nepal. So these SANS members, they can not only work in track 1 and track 1.5 and track 2, but also they know how to take the policy messages across, both at grassroots level as well as at macro level. And most important, research is their niche. And here I also would like to thank UNESCAP for supporting SANS for last many years. I think SANS and UNESCAP collaboration, they have already made quite a progress. And then finally, I think we need to take this SANS and UNESCAP progress beyond UNESCAP now. We need to present our research-based solution in other forums. Of course, COP28 is one, and my concrete recommendation here would be that based on the policy papers that we are writing, we should organize a side event in COP28 presenting SANS, UNESCAP, and other like-minded organizations' combined position in COP28. And I'm also endorsing it as the chair of a board of CANSA, Climate Action Network South Asia, which contains more than 300 members. So CANSA, SANS, and other like-minded organizations, we should have a side event in COP28 where we can present our case about loss and damage and about involving other multilateral stakeholders. Similarly, Nagesh's recommendation on WTO and TRIPS, this transfer of technology, the trade of energy, this is another excellent platform that we should not miss. High-level political forum in New York, that is still another opportunity. And in order to rehearse all of this, I'll invite, like last year, the SANS members and UNESCAP to join STPI's 26th Sustainable Development Conference in Pakistan, which would be held from 21st to 23rd November this year in Islamabad. And that's where we're trying to finalize our preparation for COP28. Thank you very much for your time and attention, Makiko and dear comrades.
Thank you very much, Abid. Yes, that's the arrows, like spaghetti, that one is very, yes, symbolic of the complexity, but also the opportunities. And it will be great, really. This year is an opportunity in the sense that there are many, many fora at global level. And of course, it's the midpoint for the SDGs as well. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of attention too, also from the world and, the countries, the member states around how do we, turn the corner towards SDGs. So yes, absolutely. I think we should capitalize that on together. Thank you very much for that. Now I'd like to shift over to another part of, I think, the equation, also in the South Asia region, more than Southwest Asia, the perspectives from the least developed countries. There's a dynamic now in this sub-region of graduating LDCs. And of course, of all the challenges that already have been mentioned, what does that mean for the LDCs is really important as well. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Paras Karel, the Executive Director of the South Asia Watch on Trade, Economies and Environment from Kathmandu. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So, thank you, SCAP, in particular, SSWA and SANS for organizing this and giving us and including me this forum. So climate action is a broad topic, and I have sort of taken the liberty with the agreement of the organizers to narrow it down a bit to focus on the least developed countries. And why so? There are about a dozen LDCs, least developed countries in the Asia-Pacific region, and 10 of them are on the path towards graduation. And within this SSWA region, there are 4 LDCs. Now, I will be looking at 3 or 4 broad themes. One would be, low level of industrialization and structural transformation, growth enhancing structural transformation in LDCs. This is a topic that SCAP has been working a lot, and I'll try to link it with the climate agenda. The second issue is that of finance, climate finance, and link it with graduation issues. And the third would be emerging trends like trade in carbon markets, and carbon standards. And finally, I'll also briefly touch upon the SAARC action plan on climate. It was launched in 2008, and suggest how it can be linked to this initiative. So first, I'll provide the context and then go for a policy support. So the context is, the level of industrialization, or what is called growth enhancing, structural transformation, is very low in least developed countries. These countries are structurally handicapped. And although quite a few of them are on track towards graduation, because they tick a number of boxes, the fundamental constraints remain. Now they have faced the challenge of combining growth enhancing structural transformation with the green growth agenda. Now, quite a few industrial policies, including the industrial policy in Nepal, for example, do not speak to the green structural transformation agenda. And there are certain gaps within the existing industrial policies and strategies. For example, some industrial policies lacking sharp focus, there being a lack of sector-specific strategies, or provisions in an industrial policy or strategy not being implemented via other policies or acts. Now, this is an opportune time to address these existing gaps in the industrial policy and strategy, while also addressing the green agenda. Now, how do you go about this? One could be support for policy on green structural transformation in the region, in the region's LDCs. For example, technical assistance to revise, refine, update, or introduce industrial policy. Or if you have an industrial policy, you may not have an industrial development strategy, trade policy, a trade integration strategy, to revise, update, or introduce them to speak to green structural transformation agenda. Right? Now, this may look a bit vague, so I'll provide more specifics. For example, a country has a climate action plan or a strategy, as well as an industrial policy, trade policy, and trade strategy. There is a need for help or assistance to integrate these two. For example, if agriculture exports are among the top priority potential exports in a country's export basket, then looking at the possible impact of climate change on those particular agriculture products that have been prioritized for exports. Now, existing trade policies and trade integration strategies do not really, factor them into account in the action matrices. Secondly, if you look at the background reports underpinning trade integration strategies or diagnostic trade integration studies, for example, those supported by the Enhanced Integrated Framework, we'll see references to promotion of environmentally sustainable products or environmentally preferable products, right? But in the action matrix itself, we find little or few action points as to how to promote these products. For example, you need certification, you need marketing, right? How do you go about that? So this is what I mean by integrating climate action plan and strategy and industrial trade and strategy. And here, SCAP, sticking to its core comparative advantage, can provide research support for policy formulation, awareness raising, and knowledge sharing. And as I said earlier, 5 LDCs from this region will graduate by 2026. Bhutan is graduating in 2023. Solomon Islands in 2024. Bangladesh, Laos, PDR, and Nepal in 2026. And for Bangladesh, Laos, PDR, and Nepal, 2023 is the second year of the 5-year preparatory period that we have received for graduation. Okay. Now, there are LDC-specific funds and support mechanisms related to aid for trade, climate finance, and technology development and transfer. For example, the Enhanced Integrated Framework, the LDC Fund, the Technology Bank. We have access to those funds until graduation, and there are also available extensions to the same for a number of years, 4 to 5 years. However, not all LDCs have been able to really utilize these funds and support mechanisms. So there is a scope for assisting them to utilize these LDC-specific funds and mechanisms. And in doing so, it will also help build their capacity to utilize other funds and mechanisms, for example, the Green Climate Fund or Adaptation Fund that are available to all developing countries, access to which will entail more competition in future. Now, some specific points. Support to LDCs to prepare bankable projects to secure climate finance. For example, by complementing or facilitating existing project preparation facilities that exist within the Green Climate Fund, LDC Fund, and Adaptation Fund, right? And then because we lack bankable projects, LDCs have not been able to utilize these funds to the desired extent. And secondly, support LDCs to leverage aid for trade, support and mechanisms to help them develop bankable projects, which can then be submitted to various multilateral climate financing facilities or even to the private sector, for example, for financing. For example, aid for trade support can be triggered when the trade-related dimension is equally or even more important than the climate-related dimension in a particular project. And finally, support LDCs in developing proofs of concept in projects to show that an idea has been successfully tested on the ground, right? So when we support these LDCs to utilize existing funds, then this will also ultimately help them go for other sources of financing like blended finance and so on. If you are able to utilize these existing funds, then it will be a tall order to talk about drawing on blended finance or leveraging private finance. And my final point is with regard. So I've already discussed the second slide. Now the final the penultimate actually slide is with regard to emerging issues. Okay, trade in carbon, carbon markets, carbon standards, carbon border adjustment mechanisms. These are likely to be increasingly important agendas in trade and climate negotiations. So the European Union has the emission trading scheme. California in the US has it. The EU has introduced a border carbon adjustment mechanism. There are voluntary carbon markets, and there are also other types of carbon markets. Now, then we have the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, whose detailed rules have recently been worked out by COP26 and 27. And this Article 6 has implications for the evolution of carbon markets in future. Now, amidst all this, there is a need for enhancing the understanding of these issues and developments on the part of LDCs, policymakers, as well as the private sector. Actively and meaningfully participating in the related negotiations, formulating and developing appropriate domestic policies and regulatory frameworks and institutions to harness the opportunities and mitigate the adverse effects with regard to these developments. Now, for example, just 3 points. Awareness raising followed by capacity building of stakeholders in LDCs to contribute to and understand existing and evolving agreements, rules, trends, methodologies concerning carbon markets, carbon standards, and the opportunities and challenges they present, because these are likely to be very important in the future. And this is where SCAP can begin with capacity building, knowledge sharing, and dissemination. Sharing of experiences of other countries, for example, India and China, who are at the forefront of utilizing the clean development mechanism. However, other LDCs have not been able to really utilize it to the extent these countries have. If we have sort of missed the clean development mechanism boat, then through capacity building and preparations right from now, maybe we can avoid the same fate, so to speak, with regard to a similar mechanism being introduced via Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which will pave the way for carbon markets. And finally, awareness raising followed by capacity building of LDCs to understand the carbon border adjustment mechanism, its potential impacts, and how it may evolve in the future. And this is my final slide, where I would like to refer to the SAARC Action Plan on Climate Change 2008. And here, one priority in the action plan was capacity building for clean development mechanism projects. Now, I think there's a need to adapt this to recent developments and climate change agreements. For example, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which seeks to build upon and extend the clean development mechanism. And then a thematic area number 3 in the action plan is about policies and actions for technology transfer. For example, technology needs assessments, including research and development and capacity development, assessing barriers to technology development for adaptation and mitigation option. Now, there's a need to review the implementation status of this action plan, and also draw on country level plans and priorities to take this forward. And this is also could be an area where SCAP, SSWA, and SANS can contribute. I will pause now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we hope we can find, very good learnings and also capacity already built in these 15 years that could be also used for South-South cooperation, capacity building within the sub-region. Thank you very much. I'd like to move on to another kind of approach to solutions, so to speak, nature-based solutions, and this biosphere approach. I'd like to introduce Dr. Mohammed Mahfouz Kabir who is the research director in the Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. So, friends, good time to all of you. So, it's already mentioned, it's a solution. So, in fact, we are talking about the urban heat islands, and so one of the nature-based solution could be the forests. So it can be land forest, it can be in fact mangrove. I mean, the hybrid of the the coastal and also land. So and definitely, I mean, if we can in fact target this kind of nature-based solution, then I think it would have a high impact on the challenges of climate change, and also since it's already existing, so and there might not be that kind of huge investment, but its return will be very high. So in terms of the solution towards the challenges of climate change. So and Sundarban, so many of you already know. So it's an in fact the largest in fact natural mangrove forest. I mean, they're located in the parts of West Bengal of India and Bangladesh. And if we consider the size, it's about 10,000 square kilometers. So and 6,517 square kilometer in Bangladesh part, and the rest in the Indian part. So there are a lot of different benefits, but I'd highlight some of the benefits. Like, I mean, it promotes biodiversity. So now we are concerned about the loss of biodiversity because of the human intervention, the anthropogenic activities. So, and it also protects from cyclone and coastal erosion. So it's natural protection from these kind of adverse events. And now you see the cyclone Mocha and others. And if you see the recurrent cyclones in the Bay of Bengal, so it's happening. It's getting a lot of damages. So back in early 1970s, the father of the nation of Bangladesh, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, he said that so without, in fact, the existence of Sundarban, so it's very difficult to survive in this part of the world. So that's the simple thing. And there are a lot of, in fact, benefits, in fact, in the localities, like in the creation of employment and also a lot of, in fact, business activities like the cargo movements, the international trade and other things, and also the harvesting of different, in fact, forest resources. And the most important thing is this carbon sequestration. So that's very important thing. And even though we are expecting that the carbon emission would be, in fact, lessened during COVID-19, but if you see the kind of emission and then carbon equivalent emissions, so it's terrifying. And now we are back to even though it's not that full normalcy because of the ongoing pressure in the international business environment, but still we are heavily emitting carbon, and the cumulative stock of carbon is creating a lot of heat impacts. So the carbon sequestration is very high in the mangrove forests. So and nearby ecosystem, like I mean, it's the 4 times, in fact, higher carbon sequestrator than the land-based forest. So it's very important to understand all this. So and it provides livelihood options, like I mean the ecotourism. So it's an important thing. And even though Bangladesh government had as the tourism plan, but it has recently drafted a tourism master plan in Sundarban and other parts of Bangladesh, and also the World Bank and also the USAID, they are also interested in ecotourism. So there are things that are happening in the livelihoods part and also the business activity without hampering the natural environment of Sundarban. But still, there are a lot of challenges. So what are the economic aspects? So there is an inland water, in fact, protocol routes. So we discussed in the yesterday session. And it's not only Bangladesh, India protocol routes, but also we are talking about the BBIN, in fact, protocol routes. So, and it includes the sub-regional countries like Nepal and Bhutan and parts of India, especially the northeastern parts and also the West Bengal. So these are involved. So, and if we see the other economic activities, like the Mongla seaport is located in Sundarban in Bagherhat. So it has dual linkages, like it has linkages with the inland water protocol routes and also the international businesses, like we have in fact, Bangladesh India coastal shipping agreement. So it's an important thing, and a lot of cargoes are moving. So and from the Mongla seaport to India and other parts of in fact the region and outside world. So the lot of, in fact, ships are moving. So and in the coming years, so because of the as we discussed yesterday, so there's an in fact a potential of mistake, in fact, coastal shipping agreement. So it will, in fact, increase the movement of cargo substantially in the coming years, since it's going to be implemented very soon. So and the economic activity surrounding Sundarban is going to create a lot of threats. So that's the simple thing that we understand, even in fact, with or without, in fact, taking into consideration that biodiversity and other aspects. So, and if you see the current movements, like I mean the container carriers, cargo ships, feeder, in fact, mother and feeder vessels, so carrier tankers, lighter age ships, bulk cargo tankers, lot of things. So these are moving, and in addition to that, a lot of movements and the formal and informal movements of the boats carrying human inside the Sundarbans. I mean the students and others, in fact tourists, they're going. So it's creating a lot of impacts on Sundarban. So, and what are the major challenges? It's reduced flow of upstream water, especially the sweet water. So the Sundarban means the beautiful forest, and it's based on the tree Sundari. So Sundari is based on the in fact sweet water. So even though it's located in the coastal part, but if we don't ensure the, in fact, flow of, I mean, the adequate flow of in fact sweet water, so it's creating a lot of challenges. So Sundari tree cannot live without, in fact, the sweet water. So that is one thing. The oil spillage. So there are, in fact, evidences of oil spillage. I mean the oil tankers moving, and sometimes, I mean it happens. And disposal of waste and pollutants. So since there are a lot of economic activities, even though it's beyond Sundarban, we have an Rampal power plant, coal-based power plant, and so coal is moving. So and then the lot of movement of fly ashes and other, in fact, waste. So these are in fact creating a lot of, in fact, likelihood of pollution. And also there are a lot of cement factories and steel mills, I mean the nearby Sundarban. So I mean we are, in fact, Bangladesh government is pursuing the high growth trajectory to become a developed country by 2041 according to its vision 2041. So and huge, in fact, economic activities are going on, and there is another thing, like where vehicle speed, so it's not controlled right now. So so and then noise pollution and light pollution. So these are also the challenges. So we need to consider, and just there is a one-to-one kind of, in fact, linkage, like I mean the responsible production and consumption, SDG 12. So it has linkage with the economic activities, and also the climate action. So the Sundarban is facing recurrent, in fact, challenges of cyclone and salinity, other. So in fact, SDG 13 is linked, and life on land. So there is a land in Sundarban, so in which there are a lot of species, biodiversity is also included, and also under the sea. So in surrounding Sundarban. So lives are in there, and life below water. So SDG 12, 13, 14, 15. So all these are included in the SDG. So now the way forward, the last part of my presentation. So we need regional cooperation, even though we talk a lot about the trade and other connectivity issues, but from UNESCAP or BIMSTEC or the BBI, so or even SAC. So we don't, in fact, often, in fact, highlight on these issues of natural forest and also the mangroves, love and sympathy for mangroves. So this not that much significant. So definitely we need, in fact, economic activities, but we have to go beyond ecotourism, blue economy, maritime cooperation. So these are the buzzwords, but we have to think about if we want to protect the, in fact, ecosystem, and if we want to achieve the SDG 12 to 15. So that's very important. And since the motor vehicle agreement in BBI and also the coastal shipping, Bangladesh, India, and BIMSTEC, so we have to take into account this critical ecosystem in order to ensure the nature-based solution, and also UNESCAP. So it can provide the technical support. We talk a lot about transport connectivity, but even though there is a transport, in fact, surrounding Mongla seaport and also the Indian waterways are concerned, but we have to, in fact, take into consideration this issue of Sundarban, the critical and the largest natural mangrove forest, in order to maintain any kind of policy or in fact, discussion regarding the regional cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have 2 minutes left, as usual, bad time. So I'd like to invite 1 or 2 suggestions, questions, very briefly from the audience.
Mikiko, I just
Yes.
wanted to take the floor because
Okay.
there are 40 odd participants online who have joined. And there are 2 questions which I would like to ask the panel quickly. One is from Sunandita Kanjilal. She's from Mumbai. And that's a very interesting question, that she says that every citizen has a role to play in making a difference to the society and world at large, especially in context of SDG. So her question is, how can we individuals support this cause as an individual? So that's the first question in terms of the climate change. The second is from Jyotsna Mohan. She works a lot on, she's a part of a civil society organization. And her question and observation is that the NDCs in many countries, including the region, have not found any mention of SDGs. Very few countries have passed legislations on climate action or sustainable development, enhancing the long-term accountability of the government around the Paris Agreement. So in the nutshell is that since most of these NDCs focus on mitigation and fail to capitalize on opportunities, we have been very poor in this region in participating in policy making. So what need to be done to handle this? The last, now people have been encouraged by me asking them the questions. Okay, so I will ask 2 more questions, but that's for the time. The another is from Mariam Shakila from Maldives, that the climate change is a universal problem that requires a universal solution. And we are all on the same sinking boat together. So we need to address it with a unified voice. And therefore, what is that we need to pass it on to our children? So it's just a comment, not a question. And then from Daya Sagar Srestha from Nepal is that the South Asian countries should discuss on climate finance issues. The developed countries should keep promise to provide $100 billion US. Investment should be increased towards renewable energy. Climate fund should be 100% grant, and it should be increased to adaptation. Yeah. So I leave it here for the panel if anybody has some comments to make. Thank you.
Yeah, is there anybody in this room who would like to add any contribution or question?
Thank you, Mikiko. In view of time constraint, I will just ask a quick question. Since all panelists are from South Asia, by the way, I'm Chong Dorji, representing BIMSTEC, Director for Environment and Climate Change. I just wanted to know that I think one of the common points from all the presentation is that cooperation and partnership, be it at the regional, sub-regional, or even at national level, are very important. And then just wanted to know if maybe like panelists maybe whether aware or not, is there any regional project on climate change or environment in South Asia? And if it is there, if there is any one, and is it how it is functioning? Because BIMSTEC, although the leaders have pronounced the importance of climate change since its inception 1997, but the actual work has been started only from last year. So we just have established a working group on climate change and environment, and the action plan is yet to be finalized. So we are thinking to purely focus, since BIMSTEC is a regional organization, to come up with at least a few bankable projects on environment and climate change where regional cooperation can also be enhanced. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for all those good questions. Also messages, both online, and thank you very much, BIMSTEC Director here. In light of the time, and of course we have the panelists who are always thinking about these questions, I think, I'm going to ask everybody to basically take, I think there was a very good question on what can individuals do to join this? And if we were to have a unified voice, what would that message be? And then there were some other questions. I'll leave it to you to really, address it, but maybe, is it 1 minute each? Is that possible? Okay, start from Nagesh.
Thank you, Mikiko. And I think some very interesting questions have come. The very first one, that as a citizen, what we could do. I think a very clear answer to that would be, there is this concept called lifestyle for environment. I think every individual starts becoming conscious of what is my responsibility. Not consume too much of paper, not consume too much of electricity, save everything, recycle, reuse. And, so there are very clear guidelines to follow. Now, second thing I want to pick up is Daya Sagar Shrestha's question, climate finance. I think he's very right, and I refer to it, that there have been many commitments over the years by international community, all to be forgotten when you get back home. For 50 years, there has been a 0.7% of GNI target to be given as official development assistance, yet to be delivered. There was 2009 commitment of $100 billion per year in climate finance, yet to be delivered. But the discussion that I've been part of in the G20 recently, and I've written a paper for Think 20 on this. What is being talked about? The recent estimates show that we don't need $100 billion, $200 billion. We need trillions of dollars. There is a shortfall. There is going to be a shortfall of $1 trillion of climate finance every year for developing countries alone. So we really need to scale up climate finance in multiple manners. And the discussion now is that since governments do not have any money to give, why not, scale up the multilateral development banks by a factor of 5 at least, which can be done easily by increasing their capital. But there is an issue of governance which comes into picture. There is another thing which I am personally very much committed to promoting, which is international financial transactions tax. Actually, way back 12 years ago in Bangkok, when I was heading the MPFD, we tried to push it at that time in the aftermath of the global financial crisis. That time, G20 could not move forward on that. But now, again, it is being pushed, and it's something very sensible that, you charge a very, very small tax on the money which changes borders every day. And $7.5 trillion of money changes borders or crosses borders every day. So a very tiny 0.05% tax would generate $650 billion per year which could go a long way in helping developing countries in meeting their climate commitments. So I'll stop here because more than 1 minute, I'm sure.
Thank you. Abid.
Yes, we do have forums like South Asia Cooperative Environment Program based in Colombo and SAARC. But my proposal would be that we should have issue-based alliances. For example, alliance around renewable energy, alliance around air pollution and smog, alliance around Indus Basin restoration. So to avoid the geographical politics that our region is facing, it would be better to focus on issues, work around them, and I think that would be a much efficient and diplomatically more acceptable way to work together, just like as all the countries of the region, they are together in G77 plus China.
Thank you. Over to this side, Paras.
There was a question with regard to what LDCs are doing in the context of climate change. Now, Nepal and even and Bhutan have a national adaptation plan of action. There are local adaptation plans of action. And then Bhutan says it's a carbon neutral country and will continue to remain so. Nepal has committed to being neutral by 2045. So that's outlined in their nationally determined contributions. Now, implementation of nationally determined contributions hinge critically on the availability of finance, because it is clearly stated there that most of these commitments will be implemented conditional upon the availability of finance. So that will be very, critical. This issue of the composition of climate finance in terms of loans versus grants is a recurring issue of debate, and how the nationally determined contributions will be financed will continue to be a major issue. And on regional cooperation, climate change is frequently argued or touted as a relatively low-hanging fruit in terms of regional cooperation, even in SAARC, whereas other issues may be bogged down in political considerations or conflict. A climate change issue could be a platform where everybody could come on board. Now, this SAARC Action Plan on Climate Change 2008, reviewing its implementation status, for example, and updating it could be, I think, one way ahead in terms of forging a cooperation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
So just two things. One is what LDCs are doing. So it's part of Bangladesh. So Bangladesh has prepared its Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. So, and also National Adaptation Plan. It's recently published, and also the INDC. So it's regularly, in fact, being submitted by the government of Bangladesh. And also there are two plans. In fact, the second perspective plan, Vision 2041. So it has, in fact, dedicated sections on the climate change, and also the 8th five-year plan of Bangladesh. It also has the chapters. So, but one thing regarding the project, regional project. So I think the World Bank is interested to have a collaboration on the Sundarbans. So it's regional cooperation on Sundarbans and on different dimensions like hydromorphological studies and also the, in fact, ecotourism and in fact, regional cooperation on the livelihoods support, and also the other plans like infrastructure and inland water. But it depends on the political support. So if the governments are in fact interested, and if this in fact don't go against the ministry's priorities, so then that would be implemented. But there might be in fact the modifications of the initial plans. But I think this can be included, and the Sundarbans can be included in the priority sectors. One of the priority sectors like environment and climate change in BIMSTEC. So that can be in fact initiated. So this, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And in this is a loop, no? Because if the governments do have policies addressing climate action, SDGs, And if the citizens are not aware of it, then also the citizens not only not know what is in plan in a country, but also not sure of what contribution they can make. So I think that is also a very important loop. But I'd like to thank everybody for coming, both online and here in Bangkok. Also, thank you for the contributions in terms of questions, also suggestions. And certainly, last but not least, thank you to all the panelists here for sharing a very rich, actually a lot of information here. I would like to follow up from ESCAP to see what we can do together this year, SANS together, to really take the opportunity of all the forums that will happen, but also to really bring it down to the ground for the people of these countries. Thank you very much.